Hi everyone, it's Tamara Martin again. Thank you for continuing to stay for the program. We really appreciate it. We see that you all got lunch, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our lunchtime program. I would like to introduce a pre-recorded video that's been provided by Kara Blond. She's the executive for the Office of Presidential Libraries, and she is my amazing boss. And she is going to talk to us a little bit about the Presidential Library System. She directs the Office of Presidential Libraries, which oversees 16 presidential libraries and museums across the country, representing the administrations of President Herbert Hoover through President Joe Biden. So with that, I will hand it to Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. And hi, everybody. My name is Kara Blond, and I'm the executive for the Office of Presidential Libraries here at the National Archives. The presidential libraries are comprised of 16 libraries and museums across the country, representing the administrations of Herbert Hoover through Joseph Biden. Each year, our presidential libraries welcome thousands of visitors, millions even, from all over the globe to learn more about American history, culture, civics, and our shared experience. The library system is unique to the United States. Presidential libraries are archives and museums that bring together the documents and artifacts of a president and his administration and present them to the public for study and discussion without regard for political consideration or affiliation. Our libraries and museums, like their holdings, belong to you, the American people. In the early years of our country, many presidential papers and records were lost, destroyed, sold for profit, or ruined by poor storage conditions. But in 1939, President Franklin Roosevelt sought a better alternative and established the first presidential library. Congress legislated this policy, passing the Presidential Libraries Act in 1955. Through archives, museums, and public programs, presidential libraries continue to preserve the documents and artifacts of our presidents, helping us learn about our nation and our democracy. We protect, preserve, and provide access to a combined total of, get this, 600 million pages of textual materials, nearly 20 million photographs, over 20 million feet of motion picture film, nearly 100,000 hours of disc, audio tape, and videotape recordings, over 500,000 terabytes of electronic data, and close to 750,000 museum objects across the library system. These varied holdings make each library a rich source of information and a center for research on the presidency. Our teams actively work to declassify and make additional records available to the public. We're also working to digitize records to provide broader online access to all. We've heard such a robust conversation today between our two panel discussions about the East Wing and the White House restoration. The contributions of all First Ladies have been truly impactful. The lighting of the White House, opening the People's House to public tours, and incredible attention to restoration details under First Lady Pat Nixon have particular resonance with me. I've had the honor to visit the White House and have seen Pat Nixon's influence still prevalent today and enjoyed by visitors each year. You can use the QR code for this event to see digital copies of many of the historical moments mentioned in today's discussion. We invite you to visit one of our presidential libraries or our website at nara.gov to learn more about our records or our public programs and services. When you come to one of our presidential library sites, we encourage you to take advantage of our library passport program. I've got one too. On your travels to libraries across the country, you can keep a commemorative stamp from each library in a keepsake booklet. I wanted to take a moment to thank each of our esteemed panelists and moderators for such an informative and engaging discussion today. A special thank you to the Richard Nixon Foundation, White House Historical Association, Docent Guild, and the federal staff at the Richard Nixon Presidential Library and Museum who helped make today's event such a success. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion so far, and next I'll pass it back to Tamara, who will be hosting the next part of our program, which is a discussion with White House curator Donna Hayashi Smith. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kara. We really appreciate you sending us that message. And now I am thrilled to introduce White House Curator Donna Hayashi Smith. We are so happy you were able to join us here today.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Appreciate it.
So Donna is White House Curator. You were appointed in February 2024. You previously served as Associate Curator of Collections and Registrar, and you've been a curatorial staff member since 1995.
Yes, as of last week, I just earned my 30th year pin. So 30 years in the White House.
Congratulations. That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about how you got to your role. What kinds of jobs have you done in the past, and what has it been like to work with the White House for so long?
Well, I graduated from the University of Hawaii with an undergraduate degree in art history, and I wanted to stay in Hawaii, but quickly realized that that was not going to bode well for me. So I applied for a Smithsonian Institution fellowship and was awarded one. So that brought me to Washington, D.C., and what was a 3-month fellowship turned into 34 years. I loved museum work. I was always interested in it. And I applied for jobs, was fortunate to get hired by the Smithsonian as a registrar, an aide, a GS4, for those of you who know what that means. And then I just, through the years, worked at the Smithsonian and then applied for a position at the White House. I had met someone at the curator's office, total luck, and I was offered a position there. And through the years, I really tried to expand the collections component of the White House because our collection was growing by leaps and bounds. So I went from like a technician type of admin assistant to collections manager to collections manager registrar. During that time period, I went to graduate school. I received my master's degree with the George Washington University in Museum Studies. That was on Betty Mungman, who was the previous curator. She actually encouraged me to go to graduate school. She told me, you will never be able to move forward if you don't have a master's degree. And that was all I needed to go to school, got the master's degree, and she really supported me through it all. And then I was able to receive my promotion to associate curator. And then thankfully through the Biden administration, I was an appointed curator.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's an exciting journey.
Thank you.
So what is it like to work in the White House day to day, and what is it like to work in such a beautiful and amazing and historic museum?
Working in the White House, it can be very crazy. It's high stakes, fast paced, especially during a transition year. We those of us who have been at the House for many, many years, we know that during a transition year, it will be very, very stressful, but exciting at the same time. We have a staff, the curatorial staff. There are 6 of us. Aside from myself, we have 2 associate curators, one of fine arts and one of decorative arts. And then we have a registrar collections manager, and then an administrative collections assistant. And then just 2 years ago, we hired a museum educator, which has been she's been a wonderful addition to our office. So the curator's office is part of what's called the executive residence staff. So that's composed of about 85 people. We're like a little city on our own. We have butlers, housekeepers, we have the chefs, the florists, carpenters, plumbers, engineers, all the folks that make a household run. And we're the continuity of the White House. So we stay through every administration. We help presidents move in, and we help presidents move out.
Oh, that's great. So I think you mentioned when we chatted before that the museum is a certified AAM museum. What does that mean to those of us watching?
Yes, we are a proud member of the AAM, and we, since 1988, have been an accredited museum. So all of the museums that you know of, like the Smithsonian and the National Gallery of Art, they abide by the highest museum standards, best practices. And so the White House, that has always been a goal. So since 1988, we received museum accreditation from the American Alliance of Museums. And since that time, I have worked on 3 reaccreditations, and we have been awarded reaccreditation, with the last being in 2022. So we're very, very proud to be considered as a museum and that we do abide by the highest standards.
Oh, that's wonderful. So how large is the White House collection? How many objects do you have, and what kinds of things are there?
The White House collection is composed of 60,000 objects. It's grown about, I think when I started, I think we were at 30,000 objects. So a lot of those objects are fine arts, painting, sculpture, but also decorative arts. So China services, flatware services, things that you don't even think about, like in the East Room here. You know, if you walked into the East Room at the White House, the rugs on the floor, the chandeliers, the cornices, the draperies, the mirrors, the mantles in the room, all of those things are part of the White House collection.
That's great. And are you still collecting or adding to your collection?
We are still acquiring. We do have a collections policy that's been in place for a number of decades now. So some of the things that surprise people is that we don't acquire works by living artists, with the exception of official portraits of presidents and first ladies. That was put into place to protect presidents from constituents and from congressional folks from pressuring them to acquire works by living artists. Works also have to be created 25 years previous to the current date. Part of the collections policy also, just with all the conversations here about acquisitions, one of the priorities for acquiring, specifically with the decorative arts, is having objects that were once previously in the White House.
So a question that we get asked a lot here on tours are, what is the oldest objects? What's the biggest? What's the smallest? And some of the standard types of wow type of moments. So what is that for you?
Well, the oldest painting actually in the White House, which many folks don't know about, is the Benjamin Franklin portrait by Benjamin Wilson. It dates to 1759. But really, the oldest object in the White House collection is the portrait of George Washington by Gilbert Stuart, the Lansdowne portrait. And that was acquired in 1790, what was painted in 1797 and acquired in 1800. And also, just looking at the chandeliers here, the chandeliers are probably some of our heaviest objects, but some of the more popular objects that people often inquire about, aside from the Stuart Washington portrait, is the Kennedy portrait by Schickler, and also the Reagan portrait by Kinsler. Those are very popular.
What would you say is your favorite object in the whole collection? I know it's hard to pick one, but...
My favorite object, well, I will have to talk about a few, because it depends on the day. But one object that you all would probably see if you looked at a picture is in the Red Room. It's called the Dolphin Sofa. It's an Empire sofa. I love animal imagery, so I love the fish on the legs. Another object that many people don't have a chance to see is a Japanese chigaidana, which is a cabinet that was actually a gift, we believe, to President Pierce in 1855 by Commodore Matthew Perry. It's a lacquered cabinet chest that many first families have had throughout the house. So through its years in the White House, it has been we know it's been in the Blue Room, in the private quarters on the second floor, in the Green Room in 1902, and then most recently, Mrs. Laura Bush actually had put that cabinet in the Lincoln sitting room, and now it's at storage. But it's traveled to many different places, and when you look at some of the historic photographs, room photographs, you'll see this cabinet that first families seem to have loved. I just think it's a fascinating object.
That sounds beautiful. So I know beforehand you very generously shared some photographs with us, which you can all see on the QR code, but I think we're going to try to put them up on the screen. And I know there were 3 objects that you kind of wanted to walk us through. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about the Bronco Buster, the armchair, and the work table.
Sure. Okay. So yes, that's the Bronco Buster by Frederick Remington. It was a gift to the White House in 1973 by the Hatfield sisters in memory of Mr. Hatfield. It's cast number 23, and it was casted by the Roman Bronze Works. And that sculpture has actually been in the Oval Office since it was acquired, with the exception of during the Biden administration, when President Biden, having had so many pieces of sculpture in the Oval Office, wanted to have that sculpture in his residence office, which is the Treaty Room. I just think it's a fantastic sculpture. Every president has loved it, and we are so grateful during the Nixon administration that they acquired it. The armchair there is one that's very well known. It's in the green room. It's an easy chair. And what makes it really significant is it is actually signed on the chair frame by Lawrence Ackerman, who is the upholsterer to Duncan Phyfe. So Duncan Phyfe, we believe it's attributed to Duncan Phyfe, and Ackerman actually put the date 1811 on the frame. So you can imagine as a conservator, as a museum person, how exciting that was to discover that. One thing about that chair also that it was acquired in 1971, but also during the Bush administration, 43, when Mrs. Laura Bush refurbished the green room, we had the easy chair there reupholstered. And so the fabric that's been put on that chair dates from the 2007 refurbishment, and it was based on a circa 1800 document. So I remember working with the then designer at Scalamandre, Stokes, it was a partial document, and she finished the document, and then working with Miss Laura Bush, we decided to make it a kind of a pink salmon color there, and so that's where that upholstery fabric, what inspired it. But also what's interesting about that chair today is because a lot of the pieces in our collection are very, very old, working with our conservators, we're now doing a lot of alternative upholstery. So that means that pieces of the upholstery are applied onto panels of wood, and then that wood, or the piece that the material is covering, is then applied to the chair frame via Velcro. So we're not nailing into these historic wooden frames anymore. We're doing that more and more to the furniture in our collection so that we can preserve them.
That's so interesting. I wouldn't have thought to put Velcro back there.
And that table there is a work table attributed to Duncan Phyfe, and there are only 4 known to exist. The White House owns 2. And as you can see, there are many different ways to pull out drawers, and there's a mirror. I just find it fascinating that in the 19th century, that these cabinet makers were producing such fine forms like this. From what I understand, a young woman would have used a table like this for sewing, for needlepoint, for writing letters. It's just such an interesting form, and the fact that the White House has 2, one acquired during the Nixon administration, the other then acquired in the 1980s, is pretty fantastic.
So I know over time the White House rooms have evolved, and each president and first lady has had an impact on them. So how does the first family or president decide what goes in each room, and how does that change during a presidential transition?
So during a transition year, as I mentioned, it's pretty crazy. After the election, and once we talked to the folks with the incoming team, the administration coming in, we actually are busy preparing way ahead of that materials to present to the incoming president, first lady. There's a book that has just an Oval Office section all by itself, and we say, there's a desk section, there's a sofa section, and we asked the incoming president, what desk would you like to use? What would you like to see in the Oval Office when you arrive? And then we have sections of the book that have all kinds of beds and all kinds of tables and sofas and chairs and paintings and sculpture. And we just give the incoming family a chance to take a look at all of the materials, and then we work with them before they move in, so that on the day of inauguration, when they come into the house, their home is ready. There's a difference, though. For the private quarters, the President, First Lady can decorate as they please. Some families decide to bring in their own pieces of furniture, which is what I think we've heard about earlier today. Some families, if they have a home elsewhere, an established home, then they say, I don't want to bring anything, and they just come in. They want to use the White House collection, which is great. For the public rooms, though, we do have an advisory committee that actually helps to advise the President, First Lady on appropriate objects for these public spaces.
So the committee, can you tell us a little bit about who's on it and some of the projects that they might have worked on over time?
Yes, so it was mentioned earlier that we have the Committee for the Preservation of the White House, which was created in 1964 through an executive order during the Johnson administration. For that order, the Curator's Office was created officially, which is nice, and then the committee was actually formed. And so there are ex officio members on this committee. I'm an ex officio. There's the Chief Usher of the White House, the National Park Service Director, the Smithsonian Institution Secretary, the Chair of the Commission of Fine Arts, and then the National Park Service White House Liaison serves as the Secretary. Then the administration, the President, can then appoint other members who will serve during their administration. So my office, we work very closely with this committee whenever we plan refurbishments, whenever we have acquisitions that we're considering. We really rely on them for their expertise. We have, I've got to mention another ex officio as National Gallery Director, so we have a lot of really heavy-hitting professionals who have the ability to advise us and provide us with a lot of information as we make these major decisions. And a lot of the folks that are members who we've had, I think traditionally they probably would have had many wealthy people who would support projects. But through the years, I've seen and worked with, most of the members are folks who are curators at Winterthur, or people at the MFA Boston, or curators who really know their stuff with decorative arts and fine arts. So some of the projects we've worked on were in 2004 and 2005. Mrs. Laura Bush actually, for the first time, which was a very unusual situation, she wanted to refurbish the Lincoln bedroom. And many families prior to her kind of hesitated because the Lincoln bedroom is very symbolic, and any First Lady, any president would really be putting themselves out there for criticism. So Mrs. Bush, very smart of her, she asked the committee to help her to refurbish the room. And so we had many meetings, and we decided to create the principal guest bedroom as a combination. The look would be what Lincoln had as his office, because that was the location of his office, and then also as a guest room. So based on documents and photographs that we could find, we had a new carpet made, we had a new mantle built, we had bed cornice, window cornices, all new fabrics woven with Dries Galamandre. So we had a lot of work done, and it was very successful. Another big refurbishment under Mrs. Laura Bush was also the green room, which that chair that was just up on the screen. We worked with her heavily for that project in 2007 and 2008, from all upholsteries, but really with a nod to Mrs. Nixon, to her 1971 refurbishment. I did a count of our collections database to see how many objects are still in the green room since the Nixon administration, and there are over 40. So everything that you see in there, the window cornices, are still the cornices that Mrs. Nixon put in. A lot of the furniture pieces that you see are ones that she acquired for the White House collection. So we are very grateful in many of the rooms to Mrs. Nixon. But I would say that, and we were just talking about this earlier, that Mrs. Laura Bush actually She did a lot of refurbishments during her time at the White House, and she worked with the committee on all of them.
That's great. So what would you say is your favorite part of your job?
I think the favorite part of my job through the years, and now that I'm older, I guess I've had time to reflect more, but the favorite part of my job is really the families. You know, putting politics aside, everyone on our staff at the White House, we walk in the door and we don't talk about politics. We look at these families as people, as families that are moving in. And as it was discussed earlier, you know, there really is this connection with these first families. They rely on our staff for our discretion. They rely on us to support them and to make the White House a home for them. So it's always a thrill to me, especially on Inauguration Day, when, you know, to be able to witness that peaceful transition of power. We are given this bird's eye view to see the families walk out the door in the North Portico, the incoming president and First Lady, the outgoing president and First Lady, watch them get into the limousines and drive off to the Capitol. And every Inauguration Day, I always try to sneak out and watch this happen. And I don't know if Anita McBride is still listening, but the year that Mrs. Bush and President Bush were leaving for the Capitol, we walked out there and we hid on the steps and we saw Anita and she waved at us. And so that was really a special moment. So I think seeing the families and learning about their tastes, you know, to make the private quarters their home, that's always so interesting to me. Seeing also the presidents in the Oval Office to see what they select and what they like for themselves. And a lot of times presidents have similar likes and tastes. You know, as you can see now in the current Oval Office, President Trump is still using the draperies that Bill Clinton had in the Oval Office. And the rug that he's using dates to the Reagan administration. And when President Biden had the Oval Office, he used those same draperies, the Clinton-era draperies, and the Clinton-era rug. So seeing, aside from the decorators, the paintings that are selected, it's just a fascinating experience to be able to say that I was a part of helping to make these rooms their own.
That's amazing. So over time, have there been any White House curators that have really influenced you in your career or that you think that our audience should know more about?
Yes, I have had really, really amazing support, wonderful mentors in my time at the White House. Betty Monkman actually was she was an associate curator at the time, and then she actually hired me, and then she became curator, and she was the one that really encouraged me to go to graduate school. She really supported collections management. She supported documentation, which through the years I've learned is very, very important. She supported standards, processes, procedures, you know, with such a growing collection. So she really, really pushed that with the White House. And then, of course, Bill Allman, who we heard about earlier, he was a wonderful mentor to me, also registrar, collections person, but, you know, decorative arts curator. He's the person that I always go to, even to this day, to ask him what he remembers and what he would do. So he's been a fantastic mentor to me as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. What advice would you have to someone who wants to get into a history profession or who someday wants to work for you or on your team?
The advice I would give is, you know, in the White House, really, you need to be pragmatic. You need to be diplomatic. You can't just say no to requests because that's never going to end well. So you need to really offer alternatives. You need to be really thinking about alternatives to give to folks. You know, as I mentioned, the 85 staff that work in the White House, only 6 of the 85 are museum people. Our mission is very different from the mission of the rest of the resident staff. The mission of the staff is to serve the president and first lady, to support them. And that is our mission too. But we also have another mission, which is our museum mission. And so it's working not only with just our staff, but working with the incoming staff of the the administrations, and then working with the President, First Lady. So it really requires a lot of balance. You know, it's a home, an office, a museum, and we're constantly shifting, pivoting throughout the day, you know, just trying to make things work while also protecting our collection.
That's great advice. Thank you. So if anyone in our audience or who's tuning in is interested in learning more about the White House collections, where would you suggest that they go?
Well, I think a natural go-to is the White House Historical Association. They have a fantastic website. They have the People's House that's now open at 1700 Pennsylvania Avenue. The White House Historical has wonderful resources of information, accurate information that they have an archival library now that people can go to. There's also the National Park Service. They have the White House Visitor Center, which is located at 15th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue. There are wonderful resources as well. There are many, many publications by the White House Historical Association. We work very closely with them on a lot of the books that come out, and their White House History Quarterly as well. So there are a lot of resources out there.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Do you have any final words of wisdom or any other stories or anecdotes you want to share with us about what it's like to work in your role?
I think, you know, I think just mostly just about being open to, you know, for going back to people who are interested in going into the museum field, just being really open to figuring out the solutions. Also, you know, for someone who's interested in going into art history, you may have some relatives who may say to you, "Are you sure that's what you want to do?" And to that, I would say, don't accept that. From a personal standpoint, when I was going into art history, in particular, I was interested in medieval art history, which was very strange in Hawaii. But you know, my uncle, who was a dentist in Hawaii, asked me once when I was still an undergrad, he said, "So what are you majoring in?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going into art history." And he said, "Well, what are you ever going to do with that?" And he laughed at me, and I said, "You know, I really love art history. It's something that I'm passionate about, and I want to see where it takes me." He's no longer alive today, but I would hope that he would be very happy for me.
I think he would be proud. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciated you coming out here and sharing your experience with us. And I know we all learned a lot about the White House collection. We really appreciate it. So we just wanted to thank you.
Thanks, Tamara.
And before we wrap up today, we wanted to just note a couple of things. So Richard Nixon's presidency is one of the most extensively documented in American history. The Nixon Presidential Materials Collection that we have here on site contains approximately 46 million pages of documents, 3,700 hours of recorded presidential conversations known as the White House tapes, 4,000 separate recordings of broadcast video, nearly 4,500 audio recordings, 300,000 still photographs, 2 million feet of film, and more than 4,200 state and public gifts. We did some rough math, and if you averaged out the size of an 8 by 10 piece of paper and you lined them up, if you took those 46 million documents, it would go from here to New York, back 2.5 times. So pretty far. Our team is continuously working to declassify records and make them available to the public. Our research room is open Monday to Friday from 9:30 a.m. until 4 o'clock p.m. If you do want to research with us, we encourage you to make an appointment so we can do an advanced consultation and orientation with you, and we can make sure we have the records pulled when you arrive. Appointments can be made by emailing us at nixonreference@nara.gov. We also invite you to join us for one of our upcoming events and public programs that are hosted by us at the Nixon Library or the Richard Nixon Foundation. The Pat Nixon Day of Service is coming up on Monday, so if you are able to come back, we encourage you to do so. You can also learn more about both of our organizations by visiting www.nixonlibrary.gov and www.nixonfoundation.org. We wanted to thank all of our speakers and our special guests and our keynotes, and of course to Donna today for being here, sharing your insights, advice, and information with the public. And also thank you for researching with us and highlighting records for those that enjoyed our program today. We also wanted to give another special thank you to the dedicated staff at the Nixon Library over there. And then also a big thank you to the Richard Nixon Foundation, which I know are back there, so thank you. And also to our docent guilds, who I know are spread out. And some right there, so thank you. And before we do close, we just wanted to make one more note. We wanted to point out the Susan B. Anthony bust over here. So I don't know if you wanted to provide like a quick overview of what that is before we go.
No, Susan B. Anthony has actually been here for a few years now, so we were thrilled to send her all the way to California, and we're expecting to have her back this summer, so. But it's okay if she's a little late, but yeah. But thank you for taking such good care of her.
Oh, thank you. So if you have a chance before you go, we'd suggest you come over and take a look at it. It's a beautiful, beautiful bust. So thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next year for our 3rd annual symposium. Have a great day.